Do that. There we go. Wanted to make sure we were recording this. And so my name is Brady Murray. I'm the founder of Caring Tide. It's wonderful to be able to have all of you here today. Just a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, please make sure that you are muted. Also, we will be monitoring the chat. And so as we're presenting today, if a question comes up, we'd encourage you and invite you to write that question in the chat, and we'll be able to monitor that and answer that to the best of our ability. As we get started, I'd like to talk very first on a short disclaimer. And so Caring Tide respects every individual's right to express who they are. In one-on-one discussions, we will use person first or identity first language based on the person's preference. In group settings, we will use a mix of the two in the hopes of having everyone feel like they are being included and respected. In addition, I have a special surprise that for all attendees today that are with us through the end of the presentation, that watch the entire presentation, we will provide to you a free resource, and that is our National Resource Directory that is specific for parents of children with disabilities. We include that National Resource Directory for all 50 states, and that is a free gift that we'd like to provide for you today for all those that make it to the end. First and foremost, please allow me to introduce myself. As I shared, my name is Brady Murray. I am the founder of Caring Tide. I am also a father of children who have disabilities. Ironically enough, I have 11 children, 7 of which are adopted, 4 biological children. Of my 11 children, 5 of my children have a diagnosed disability. 2 of my children that I'm showing in that picture are my 2 sons that have Down syndrome. A large part of my wife and I's, Andrea and I's life is adoption. As I shared, we actually started a nonprofit organization called Rod's Heroes that was started 11 years ago, to where we help inspire families to answer the call to adopt a child with a disability. And my wife and I, Andrea, have been married now for 21 going on 22 years. So a little bit about Caring Tide. In our country today, there's 42 million Americans that are disabled. 7 million of these individuals have a cognitive disability and are dependent upon a caregiver. Honestly, in my opinion, this is the most overlooked and underserved demographic in our country. I recognize that we are at times feeling like we are alone, that at times we're charging up this mountain and it feels like there's really nobody to turn to, and that there's nobody that understands exactly what it is that we're experiencing as caregivers. I want to tell you that you are not alone. And a large part of our mission of Caring Tide is to make sure that every single family doesn't feel alone. Our mission is to give every single family in our country who have been entrusted with a loved one with a disability the opportunity to be able to get and receive the support and the services that they need and that their children need in order to ultimately rise up and do what I like to say is sing the song that they're meant to sing. So a little bit about as far as how this whole journey started. So I shared we have 11 children. When we first were married, Andrea and I were expecting our first child. Brinley is our daughter. She's a senior in high school this year. She graduates in just a few weeks. And we're now, and I'll now share with you about our second child. So we were expecting this child in 2007. I found out that we were going to have a son. And honestly, I was so excited about that. I could envision all of the things that we'd be doing as dad and my son. We'd be fishing, we'd be camping, we'd be playing baseball, we'd be doing all those things. The day finally came for us to welcome Nash into our family. Andrea did amazing through the labor and delivery. And about 10 minutes after Nash was born, the doctor came over to me, put his arm around me, and he said in a very somber voice, "Brady, we think that your child has Down syndrome." That was my introduction into our community. And that was my introduction in the beginning of this journey that has been such an integral part of our family. I went and I told Andrea, I was very emotional. I shared with her, and together we cried. And it was a very emotional part, as many of you know and understand. I'd like to say, fast forward now, Nash is an absolute superstar. So Nash is 17 years old. He's attending a high school. He's in many typical classes. He's involved in many typical things, and he's just absolutely the life and light of our life. We love him so much so that we adopted another child that has Down syndrome, Cooper, from China in 2011, and he's also an incredible and special part of our life. Well, as part of this journey, Nash and Cooper love school. Everything about school they love. In fact, I have had conversations with Andrea, and a large part of why we founded Caring Tide was a conversation that stems back a number of years ago when Andrea and I looked at each other and said, these kids love school so much. What in the world are we going to do when the school bus stops coming? And that was the question that we asked ourselves that started this inspiration behind Caring Tide. Honestly, we didn't have exactly the answer of what life to look like after our boys graduated from high school. Well, that stemmed a number of other questions that we started to ask ourselves. Questions like, what happens when Nash turns 18 and is considered an adult, yet is still at a level of a 7-year-old? We asked a question of, will Nash be able to go to college or vocational school someday? Can we prepare Nash to maybe live on his own someday? And then another question, will Nash be able to be married someday? These were all questions that were pressing on our minds. And then the question that honestly for us has been the most terrifying question that we've faced as caregivers, and that is, what will happen to our boys when we're no longer here to be able to take care of them? As I started to research this and learn more about this, I started to ask other people and really have an eye for, like, how does all of this work? I found that there was a lot of people that also had this question. Somebody that I follow on Instagram who is incredible, her name is Kate. In fact, I'd encourage you to follow her. She's awesome. She shared something that truly changed and like created I'd say a big awakening for me. And that was, she shared, I had a revelation today, one that rocked me. I have a 13-year-old, amazing yet complicated son with severe nonverbal autism, and lately he has been really struggling in the evenings. Most have no idea. Most probably wouldn't believe it. And today I realized it's not the meltdowns that are breaking me. It's the worry of who will do this after I'm gone. I'm terrified. We saw some of the comments as Andrea and I were reading this that were also saying things like, I'm terrified for the future of my 3-year-old daughter. Who will love and care for her like I do? And we saw that there are many families out there that also had this exact same weight that Andrea and I had as to what in the world are we going to do to make sure that our boys and our children are taken care of when we're no longer able to be a caretaker for them. And ultimately, that is the reason why we founded Caring Tide. And so Caring Tide, a large part of what we do is we have incredible specialists. And one of those specialists I'd like to introduce you today that will be doing the remainder of our presentation. Jenny Dopp is a caregiver, and she is a disability specialist. Jenny is the mother of 4 children that all have disabilities ranging from anxiety, depression, processing disorders, OCD, and sensory processing disorders. I'll allow her to share specifically about her son, Jackson, who has a chromosome duplication disorder and also has autism. In addition to being a caregiver and an amazing, amazing mom, Jenny has also ran a nonprofit as an executive director for 10 years, serving in this community, as well as over a decade worth of experience working with families just like ours as a disability specialist. She also has a bachelor's degree with an emphasis in family studies. And so it's my pleasure now to introduce and to turn the time over to our remaining presenter, Jenny Dopp.
Thank you, Brady. And I'm so grateful that so many people have joined us today. And I hope that the message that we share with you today will help you. I know we have a lot of worries as parents, but I hope that this message will actually help to bring you peace, that there are some answers to these questions, even though that they are heavy and they come with a lot of emotion, there really are answers. So as you can see, I have my family here, and Jackson is in the gray sweater. He's now 23 years old. So we just have left the school system. And now we are embarking on employment and trying to figure out all of these other pieces of Jackson's life, and also how disabilities impact our entire family. So what will happen to Jackson when I'm no longer here? Will his older sister, who has her own family, start to be his caregiver? Or will one of the other siblings be involved? These are all pieces that we have to figure out. And also, how will we fund Jackson's life? So this is our step one. We're going to go through 4 quick steps today. And I want to just preface this by saying we have limited time. I want to save time for questions. So this is just an overview. We could take, a whole class and just dive into each one of these steps. But I just kind of want to get you thinking and start thinking about your life. Where are you right now? What is your situation with your family, with your loved ones? Who are the caregivers in your life? What disability resources do you already have in place? We think about this like with a Disneyland map. When you go into Disneyland or you go into any big area, you start to have to think about which Disneyland area or which land are you going to go to first? Are you going to visit Fantasyland, or are you going to go over to Adventureland or see the new Star Wars ride? What does your plan look like when you go to something big like this? Well, it's the same with disability planning. In our lives, there's timelines. So you'll see this timeline here. And for the typical family who is not impacted by disabilities, they're going through their lives and they have some significant milestones in red. So their kids graduate from high school, and then you're working towards retirement, and then you have to plan for your death. Those are like the typical milestones with a neurotypical family. Well, with my family, our planning started when Jackson was 5 months in utero, and we found out about brain structure anomalies and different plans that we would have to start making when I was still pregnant with him. And then when he was born and he didn't reach milestones, and getting him involved with early intervention, starting preschool and strapping my little 3-year-old on a special needs school bus was like one of the hardest things I had to do, to like turn this little special boy over to the school district to try to help have their services help him. Then we transitioned over to, kindergarten at age 5. Then there was, even when I was in the hospital with him, I was already thinking about junior high. How are we going to survive junior high with this little boy? And then choosing graduation options, whether or not he graduated with his class or he continued through a post-high experience until the age of 22. We're thinking about Social Security, guardianship, Medicaid. How about, will we ever be able to retire as parents because we are his providers? What about what will happen to him? I will have guardianship, but what about his sister? Will she become the guardian, or will an uncle become a guardian? Who's going to pick up that when I'm no longer here? These are all pieces that we have to prepare for and think about, and also not only think about from like an emotional standpoint and giving Jackson care, but also from a financial and a legal standpoint. So we want to go through a couple of areas that we have to think about. When you work with Caring Tide, we go through and do a caregiver readiness assessment. So you already know you're living this life, you're walking the walk and talking the talk, just like I am, but you're kind of getting through the day. Okay, like this is what we're doing with the day program. This is what we're doing with our special education program. This is what we're doing with Social Security. And you're sometimes just so involved with your own life and just trying to get through the day that it's just hard to think about all of these other pieces. And sometimes, honestly, as parents, we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes there might be resources available in our state or through the government or through a community organization that we're not even aware of. And so that's my job as a disability specialist, is to help connect you with the resources in your area. We're a national organization. So while I'm here in Utah, I actually serve parents in Georgia and Pennsylvania, New Jersey, all over the United States. So I do have resources that can help you. After we go through your caregiver assessment, we need to think about some planning questions. This is Brady and his wife, Andrea, as they picked up little Cooper and have had adventures with him throughout his life. And these are things that they've had to think about and things that I have to think about with Jackson. So where are we today? We have Jackson working. I still am getting him on Medicaid and Social Security. I'm working on guardianship. And you're thinking, okay, you're the disability specialist. Why are you still working through some of these issues? Well, because they're emotional choices. Jackson has a foot in both worlds. He has a foot in the disability world and he has a foot in the neurotypical world. And so I'm trying to follow Jackson's lead and figure out the best spot for him. Some of these decisions, if you have a child with a significant cognitive impairment, you already know guardianship is 100% the way to go. But did you know there's other options like power of attorney or advanced healthcare directive or supported decision making. There's all of these choices. And so as a disability specialist, I'll help you look at your specific situation and try and figure out what might be the best option. And then you get to make the choices based on what your specific situation is. Where do we want to go? If I know that I want to eventually have like a townhome or an apartment or something for Jackson, what are the steps I need to take today to put that in place? And how do I put that in place without jeopardizing things like Social Security or Medicaid or putting any assets in Jackson's name? And we'll talk about that. How will we get there? How am I going to set up a special needs trust? How am I going to fund that trust? How am I going to get connected with our district's post-high program? I think I just remember back to like our initial doctor's appointments after he was born, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was so dependent upon the school or doctors to try to help pave that way for me. And it kind of gets to a point where I didn't even get Jackson on a disability list when he was little for our state because I didn't know it was available. Nobody had told me. And so there might be resources available to you that you might not already be aware of. And that's my job as the disability specialist. So we go through and answer all of those questions for you. The second step is we perform an audit. Okay, you already have a Medicaid waiver. That's great. Okay, but we're missing this piece and we're missing this piece. What about residential care? What about day programs? What about getting them access to a food program? You have to think, okay, well, I'm caring for Jackson right now, but what would happen if I'm no longer here tomorrow? What can I already get in place? What kind of resources can I add to my portfolio and to my caregiver book that will help to prepare the way? As we go through this audit, there's three main steps to planning. And this is my job as a disability specialist, is to help you figure out all three of these pieces. So the first piece is that disability resource that I just talked about. How are we doing with special education? Okay, my child has already graduated. That's not an issue anymore. So let's make sure we have Social Security and Medicaid. Oh, well, I already tried to apply when he was younger and we didn't qualify. Well, your child's now 18, so they're now qualifying as their own person. So let's make sure those resources are in place. And how is your Medicaid waiver working for you? What holes might be happening with your Medicaid waiver? Or are you not even familiar with Medicaid waivers? Let's see if your child will qualify based upon your state's plan. What about an ABLE account? Do you have a savings account set up that's dedicated for the disability services so that it won't impact his eligibility for SSI and Medicaid? These are all of the disability resources that I can help you with. Anything from daily life, advocacy work, making sure that you're connected to voting options. What about vocation? Are you connected with vocational rehabilitation in your state? If your child knows how to make toast, that's an employable skill. So let's work towards getting your child set up with the right services so that they can have the life they envision for themselves. Have we introduced things like person-centered planning or self-determination? Does your child have a voice in their own life? A lot of times I've been mama bear for 23 years. I've been advocating and working for Jackson and trying to get him the services that I need or that he needs or that we both need. And how many times have I stepped back and said, okay, Jackson, what do you want this to look like? So even that holistic care of things that we're just going through the motions, getting these resources set up, but how are we looking at the entire transition plan for our child? What about transitioning from pediatric healthcare to adult healthcare? Do we have all of that set up? What about mental health? Do we have the proper program put in place? These are all things that I can do with the disability resources. Now you're thinking, how can you solve my issues for me? You know what? I can't change Jackson's DNA. He has an extra chromosome. I can't remove that. My situation can't just be wild roses and, sweet smelling things all day, every day. This is still real life. But what I can do as a disability specialist is give you the tools to help your family be the most successful as possible. The second tier of that is the legal. So we have to look at the legal ramifications of raising a child with a disability. That would look like power of attorney, guardianship, putting an estate plan in place. We own a home. And if we were to pass away tomorrow, it would get divided between our 4 kids. But we've had to make special preparations to make sure Jackson's piece doesn't go to him in his name. because if that were the case, that would make him ineligible for his disability right or his disability services, his public benefits like Medicaid and SSI. So we look at that entire legal piece. What do we need to put in place? And then also financial planning. Do we have a way to pay for our funerals? Do we have a way to pay for Jackson's funeral? Do we have a life insurance policy through our employer? Do we need to supplement our employer's life insurance policy with something else? What is it that will make our family be in the best possible situation to be prepared? So as a disability specialist, I'll go through all 3 points on that will with you, and we'll work through it and do it step by step while we put all these pieces in place. As we plan, this is what a traditional neurotypical family will go through. They'll just kind of say, okay, what do we need to put in place for protection or an emergency reserve? You've heard about that, having, 3 months salary or 6 months salary, or what will we do in a catastrophic situation? And then as we start to build our wealth or our assets, then you can go into things like retirement planning, or, maybe starting an endowment for your family endowment, or something that you want to do to be philanthropic or give back. So those are the steps that a typical family goes through. When you have a family like mine, our family's a little bit different. We have to think of planning as life care planning. How is our family going to be planned for? What about gifting and inheritance management? What happens when grandma and grandpa pass away and they think they're being really kind and leaving Jackson money, when really, if they were to leave Jackson money, that might jeopardize his benefits. So we have to have conversations. We have to have a plan for not only my assets getting to Jackson, but also other people's assets getting to Jackson. We need to think about a special needs trust. We need to think about where Jackson's going to live. We need to think about how he's going to manage things like transportation. Is he eligible for the government programs? Are there any cash reserves? What about his working at McDonald's? Is that going to make him ineligible? I worked with one mom who had a daughter who was about 25 who had Down syndrome, and she had her on Social Security and Medicaid, which was great. And she had so many of the pieces already done. But what she didn't understand was that her daughter was home with her every day. The mom was aging, and she said, I would like her to work, but I'm worried about her working because then she'll lose her benefits. And so as we went through it and we identified that there are ways for our youth to go out into the community, to engage, to be included and be involved and still have their benefits and work. So there's a lot of opportunities where people might not be familiar with the system, where we can help you with that. And then also think about that holistic piece. What's your family's mission statement? What do you want your loved one's life to look like? What about guardianship? Who will have them after you're no longer there? What's your intent? What do you want for them? Where do you want them to live? And of course, we want to give them a voice and have, Jackson have a voice in these decisions. But it's important that I share with people what I want for Jackson's life so that people will have a roadmap and a plan. And so we help you figure out all of those pieces that go into your letter of intent. There's other things that we need to think about. I worked with one mom and she said, we have other siblings, and so they'll just step in and care for them. Well, if I have my daughter Lexi, she has a brand new baby, and if I were to pass away tomorrow, these are not all, these are only some of the pieces Lexi would have to figure out if I don't have life insurance to help her figure that out. And if Jackson doesn't have Medicaid or Social Security, how is she going to pay for that day program? What about residential? She lives in a townhome with her baby and her partner. So how are they going to fit Jackson in with them? What about medical care? If I'm no longer here and Jackson's off of my husband's employer's insurance, how is she going to get Jackson connected to medical care and medical insurance? What about ongoing therapies with OT and PT and speech? What about Jackson's quality of life? She works, her partner works. Jackson would have to get involved with employment. That's just a lot for them to navigate. What about social outlets, spiritual outlets, recreational outlets? These are all things that your next of kin will have to figure out. So let's do some of that heavy lifting since we're the caregiver and we're the parent, and let's get some of these steps in place. This is one of the biggest expenses that people will have to figure out. housing. So I'm just going to take this is a lot of information, but I just highlighted in blue some of the most important pieces. And this is based on Utah. So if Jackson was going to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Utah, being downtown, it would be at minimum of about $1,500 unless he was in a different area. So in Utah, our transportation runs north to south, our metro line or our busing system. If you do not live north or south, or you're trying to go somewhere that's east or west, you do not have transportation. So Jackson could hire an Uber or a Lyft, but then we have to worry about like funding that and how are we going to pay for that? What about safety and getting him, as somebody who is a safe driver or that isn't going to harm or abuse Jackson? These are all things when you have a child with an intellectual disability that you have to think about. So Jackson would be forced to live in a major metro area. We wouldn't be able to connect him with rural housing where it's more inexpensive because he wouldn't have any access to the community or to transportation. So ideally, as a mom, I would want him to live downtown. So if he's going to get $983 on average for Social Security, that is not going to be enough to pay the $1,500 for rent. So there has to be some other supplement. Now, some people might have a Medicaid waiver. For Jackson, he's been on our Medicaid wait list for about 10 years, and there's no sign that he's going to get off his Medicaid wait list. So Medicaid is not an option for Jackson. So these are things that my husband and I have to think about as we put our financial plan in place. What life insurance can we put in place to help supplement? What can we put in place now to prepare for that? What about our own care? My husband's had cancer. He's been ill a lot of our married life. We're married 30 years this year, and we've dealt with a lot of things with his own health. So it's not like I can plan on, um, us always having great health. That's something that's always in the back of my mind is not only do we need to care for Jackson, but I need to prepare for if my husband needs to go in a long-term care facility. The national average is about 100,000 a year. And especially if you don't qualify yet for Medicaid or Medicare, to try to find a quality of life place to live, it's going to be expensive. What about our aging parents? My parents recently passed away. We lost both of them between 2020 and 2021. They didn't have any life insurance. They were people that were hardworking, but were month to month living on their income. And so it was about, we tried to do it the cheapest way possible, but they still wanted a funeral. And it was minimum $9,000 to $10,000 to cover their burial for each one. How will we care for their living arrangements? Luckily, they were able to live with my sister, but there were things that we had to put in place as a family to think about caring for our loved ones. So if my parents had more training, more resources when they were putting their plan together, some of that could have been taken care of long ago and put in place for us. And then we would have known those costs and what that looks like. Again, what happens if we die prematurely? When my husband was diagnosed with cancer in 2019, after we processed the diagnosis, I hate to admit this, but my first thought was, how am I going to care for these 4 kids if my husband, who's in tech and makes a decent income, is no longer here? And I'm a stay-at-home mom. How am I going to do that? There was a period of time where I stayed home and he was the one working. And so I had to figure those pieces out. And luckily we had some life insurance in place, but I wasn't sure if it was still in effect. So these are things, this is that wheel. And you'll notice that there were arrows on that wheel that kept moving. Things are always changing. Kids get married, kids leave. Those kids are Jackson's caregivers. My husband gets sick. Is our life insurance still in place? Are we going to move? Do we want to downsize? How is our income fluctuating from year to year? These are all things that we have to think about. And then what about our family, our livelihood, our fun? What makes our family tick? What kind of quality of life do we want? Is this something where we want to plan for a vacation every year with our family? Is this something where we want to make sure that certain traditions are allocated for within our budget? These are all things that we have to consider because it's part of life. It's hard to just nose to the grindstone every single day working. And we have to think about that for our loved ones too. What is their quality of life? What do we want that to look like? So the third step is we create a plan. Together, you and I will go through your family situation and create a detailed roadmap, create a plan. This will seem overwhelming at first, or maybe it already does as we're going through this, but I take it and I break it down for you into bite-sized pieces. Okay, this is the very first thing we need to do. You already have this in place. This is your next step. You already have this in place. This is your next step. We go through and analyze things like, okay, this is what's available to you. You're not alone in this journey. These are the things that you could qualify on the left-hand side from a public funding standpoint. Things like Medicaid or Medicare and what that would cover. And also on the right, things that would have to be funded privately. We always think, oh, well, when I pass away, he'll just have government benefits. Well, as I showed you in that housing slide, government and public benefits only cover a small piece. How are we going to cover things like his computer game or his clothing or his haircuts? You know, after McDonald's, they take him over to Supercuts and we get his haircut. How is his caregiver going to pay for something as simple as a haircut or dental or medical? These are all things that we have to think about. Now, as you think about your funding options, it's going to be a pie chart. There's going to be certain pieces that can come from this entity, but it can't all come from one source. So we'll have our private assets for Jackson. Then we also need to make sure that we have insurance for him. And natural support is someone like he lives in our community, he knows the people around him. Neighbors could be involved to help run him down our hill to go to McDonald's. There's his siblings, they're his church community, they're his school community that he's still attached to. And then there's that public benefit piece. And so many people, this is one of the heartaches that I see, is they rely solely on that public benefit piece, and we're not utilizing the rest of the pieces of the chart. And so it's hard for families to really get a full picture of what's possible because they're so limited with their view of we only get this amount of money. So let's look bigger and see what we can put in place to plan for that future. And here's a tough question. My husband and I talk about this sometimes. How much is enough, right? How much do we need to save today in order to make sure Jackson is cared for? And because, you know, a lot of people who are homeless, a lot of people who are incarcerated actually have disabilities because there's just not a lot of great social services out there. And sometimes they're hard to access, or sometimes there's a lot of wait lists. So let's see what we can do now to plan ahead, not only to make sure there's enough money, but to make sure that we're already tapped into that wait list, that we're already tapped into those social services. And then this is just one example of how much is enough. This is very general. We're assuming about a 6% annual compound return on our assets. There's inflation. We're considering that there's some Social Security from dad when they're 67, and that they're also receiving some retirement funding. So let's go through some options. So today, Marty is 17. His parents are 54 and 53. They want him to have about $4,000 per month to live. Now remember, Jackson's rent alone is going to be about $1,500. So we also need access to food, clothing, recreational, transportation, all of those things that we need for Jackson. It will take about $3 million from when Marty's dad dies at age 85 to support Marty from age 48 to age 85. So the parents are helping a lot before they pass away. But it's still going to be quite a bit of funding depending upon the lifespan of our child. And a lot of us might have children who have special health care needs. So maybe we don't know the lifespan of our child, but right now Jackson's healthy. And I have no reason to think why Jackson might pass away early. So we'll have to think about all of these strategies. Now, here's some possible options. Some of these are, these are just ideas. So one idea is to invest a lump sum today of $620,000 and just earning an assumed net of 6% every year. Another option, allocate via estate planning. Any assets remaining at the time of your death will go to your child's special need trust. Utilize life insurance, and there's a variety of options. We've talked about some of them. Your employer, and you can add on different products based upon your circumstances. You can open something called an ABLE account. One mom I talked to is saving for a van for her daughter, a wheelchair accessible van. And she thought she was doing something great by setting aside a little bit of money each month. She was a single mom, and she didn't realize that that savings account was going to jeopardize her daughter's eligibility for benefits. And so if she would have known about an ABLE account, she could have started saving that money in an ABLE account, because the ABLE account doesn't count against you for your Medicaid and your SSI benefits. And it's also, there's some tax advantages for an ABLE account. So I can help you with all of that. There's, I think, 48 states that have an ABLE account, and you can pick and choose which state's ABLE account program is the best for you. You don't just have to use your state's ABLE account. There's also some out-of-the-box strategies. So if you're on a really fixed income, perhaps you have a debit card with your credit union, and if you go to Walmart and you pay, $19.50 for your groceries or your, toilet paper and milk, that remaining 50 cents, you can round up to $20, and that 50 cents gets put into a dedicated savings account. So there's simple ways that you can save money each month. And there's also things like, we're not advocating credit cards, but if you do utilize credit cards, and maybe there's a reward system. I know when we go to Costco, there's a certain amount we get back every single year from our Costco card that we can then use for our needs. So did you know that if you save $20 each week for 1 year, you will save $1,040 that year? That can be leveraged to buy life insurance with a larger death benefit over the years. Now, let's talk about a two-income stream. There's lots of examples that I could give you, whether you're a single mom or you're a grandparent trying to raise your grandchild. And so we have situations and tools that can help every family, no matter what it looks like, if you're on your own or you have a great support system. But just for a demonstration, let's just look at a two-income family. So Bob and Susan are both 35 and they have 3 children. One of their children, Shane, has disabilities and needs lifetime supports. Shane is also 10 years old. Together, they earn $150,000 a year. So what could Bob and Susan do? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that Shane is eligible for SSI and Medicaid at his age of 18. Before he's 18, then the parents' income could count. That's what the decision is based off. But once they're over 18, then he's his own person, and we can get him enrolled in some of those benefits that he didn't qualify for before. They can purchase a group term life insurance on both parents through their employers. They can have a will and a revocable trust drafted with a supplemental needs trust for Shane. So what does that mean? So you have your trust, and then there's a special portion of your trust that's dedicated for Jackson. So all of the other kids, the way that we have ours set up is our assets will go into our trust. Our house is in our trust. Again, we don't want to leave anything to in Jackson's name. Upon our passing, it's divided between the 4 kids, but they have to reach the age of 25. I have a senior in high school. I don't want her to have access to money when she's at this age where she might not make the best choices financially. So we have a caveat built into our trust where they don't have access to it until they're 25. And then Jackson's portion, it will be for Jackson, set aside for him, but it will stay within the special needs trust, and the executor can help put that money in play for Jackson so that it doesn't jeopardize his benefit. So that's what that means when you have a trust, but you also have a special needs trust. So you want to make sure all of your beneficiary designations are coordinated with your estate plan and your trust. So our life insurance policies, the trust is the benefactor. And then once it goes into the trust, then it's divided between the kids. We don't want to put anything in Jackson's name. We don't want to, leave my wedding ring to Jackson. We don't want to give him any assets because that would jeopardize his future support. We also want to contribute to an ABLE account. So you think, well, we don't really have that much money right now. It doesn't really matter. I only am contributing about $20. The way that an ABLE account works is I put that $20 into the ABLE account, and then we're given what's called a stable card. It's like a debit card, and we can use that for all of Jackson's expenses. If he wants McDonald's that day, we use the stable card. If we need to buy him a haircut or clothing, we use the stable card, and it's coming out of the savings account. And I can put up to $18,000 a year this year. The amount changed in 2024. It used to be, 14,000, 15,000, 16,000. But because Jackson works, in addition to that 18,000, he can also add, I think it's an additional, it changes every year. I'll have to look, it's like 14 or 15,000 more because he's working. So Jackson makes about $13,000 a year from McDonald's, and we can save all of that in an ABLE account, and he can utilize it. Now, there's things that we need to go through with you, and I'll do that. This is a disability specialist, but we'll decide, okay, he can save this much through an ABLE account, but we also need to consider that he can also save money in the special needs trust to help save the money there. And why would we want to do both? Well, there's a thing called the Medicaid payback. So after Jackson passes away and we pay for his funeral, Medicaid would come back in and take some of that money from the ABLE account to pay back Medicaid. So I want to be very thoughtful about how much I'm putting in the ABLE account and how much I put in my special needs trust, and make sure that, that we're finding the right balance for that. The next thing that we could do is purchase a permanent survivorship or a second to die insurance on both parents, and that will pay to the trust upon the second parent's death. So I'm assuming, because of my husband's health, that he's going to pass away first. And so then upon my death, then that will be triggered and it will help to fund the trust. And we'll go through all of these pieces. I know this is really overwhelming and you might feel like, um, this is like a fire hose information, but we'll walk you through it step by step. So don't worry about that. What else could Bob and Susan do? We could purchase a survivorship, a whole life policy on both parents' lives. Again, that pays only after the second parent dies. A special needs trust can be the beneficiary, and the permanent life insurance would be in place. So typically, it can be less costly than two individuals' whole life plans. And our financial planner is fantastic, and they'll walk you through your situation. What will work for Brady might not work for me, or vice versa. So let's find a plan that's great for you, that's a good fit. And here's the kicker. The hardcore truth is that we all have an expiration date on our mortality. We have three choices on how to handle that reality. We can deny it, we can ignore it, or we can plan for it. And so that's our last step, is let's put your house in order. Let Caring Tide help you. Let me do the heavy lifting. I do this every single day for people throughout the country, and let me help you get your house in order. So meet with me. I'm going to, later in the presentation, I'll just give you a link and you can sign up for a consultation with me, and we'll help figure out what resources might be missing. What tools do you need to help your family be successful? What type of planning can be in place? And then if you decide you want to work with us, there's 9 steps that we'll go through. Some of them will apply to you, and some of them you might already have checked off. But we'll address your primary issues. What are your pain points today? What type of solutions can we identify? Let's figure out your family mission statement. What is your family value? What do you want to build into your plan? Let's put together this letter of intent, and there's all of these different points that we'll want to incorporate. Medical care, education, where you want them to live, who should be in their circle of support, what finances are in place, what medication, what therapy, who are all of the doctors, who's everybody that's part of your team. If I were to pass away tomorrow, even though my daughter's phenomenal and she's been part of our circle for 26 years, she doesn't know all of the moving parts. She doesn't know the name of Jackson's boss at McDonald's. She doesn't know how Jackson gets his vacation. She doesn't know how he's paid, all of these different pieces. I want to spell that out for people. Okay, then let's look at your financial pieces. Let's have you meet with our Caring Tide financial planner and have that consultation with them. And then you get to decide. You get to decide what types of products would help your family. There's no pressure there. You get to do what's best for your family. Everybody's situation is different. We also need to look at your life care plan. How old are you? How many years do you have till retirement? Have you been contributing to an retirement account? What types of supports are there for you? It's one of those things where you have to put on your own oxygen mask first, because if you're not thriving, how are you going to be able to help your child thrive if we haven't put those pieces in place? Let's look at the legal foundation. Do you already have guardianship? Okay, if your child's higher functioning and they don't need guardianship, what about supported decision making? Who's going to help your child make those choices? What about power of attorney for a medical situation? Maybe that's what you're worried about. Let's look at all of those pieces. Then let's implement it. Let's have those conversations with family members. Let's, we'll go through all of the key points of planning, and then let's also review it every year. It's this wheel that's constantly moving based upon the way our families change. So this is just a little snapshot of all the things that we'll cover as you work with Caring Tide. There's the estate planning, the healthcare, transition to adult healthcare, guardianship, education, employment, social life, like day programs, recreation. Jackson's doing great. He works a couple of days a week, but on the days he's home, if we don't get him out of the house at least once a day, and my husband and I both work full time, there's a definite tension in our home. So what are we going to build in to help pay for that social life? Legal matters, housing, income planning, and again, those ABLE accounts. So let's review. We're going to understand where we are today. You're going to reach out to me and I'll help you say, we're here. This is what we're facing today. Let's look at an audit of your situation. Okay, great. You have done an awesome job as a mama. You've put all of these pieces in place. Now, where can I help you fill in those gaps? What pain points can I help you solve? And let's create a plan. It's not going to be overwhelming. We're just going to do one thing at a time. And, you only have so much bandwidth. You're working, you're caring for your kids, you're trying to have a great quality of life too. So let's just do one thing at a time or as fast as you want to run. And let's make a plan and put that in place. And let's get your house in order so that you can answer that question. What will happen when I'm no longer here to care for Jackson? This is what a typical company would charge you as you're starting to work with them. You're going to look at your resource maximization. How are you going to connect with everyone? I don't know if you ever had to work with like an education advocate in school, but there are fees for services. And so these are some of the costs that would be associated with a typical plan. $1,000 for an estate plan audit. A special needs financial plan could be as much as $3,000. Well, with our process, we're going to go through and assess all of these pieces, and then you get to just select the pieces that you need based upon where your family is. And these are some of the questions. This is Jackson. He's obsessed with Star Wars. These are the things that I can help put in place for Jackson now. So helping me maximize the benefits for our family. Would working with Caring Tide be worth it? Introducing you to new resources that could help you overcome your challenges. Would working with me be worth it? If I could give you a financial plan for your future so that you can have that peace of mind and know my husband's diagnosed with cancer. This is the book. This has all the things. We have it all set up. Would that be worth it? If I could help you establish a special needs trust for your loved one so that we know that our assets are protected for Jackson, would working with Caring Tide be worth it? And if I could give you peace of mind knowing that you have a plan in place for your child, would that be worth it to you? So here's all of the different pieces that we can help you with: the maximization, the estate plan audit, and the financial planning. And again, this could be a relationship that we have ongoing. Your life is going to change. People in your life will change. Your situation with your child will change. So that's what it could be. But today with Caring Tide, instead of $9.95 a year or $97 a month, we want to get these services to you. We want to be able to help you. And so here's the link. You can use your phone and you can scan that QR code, or you can go to caringtide.com/consultation and just set up a free consultation with me. And we want to provide these services to you without a monthly fee. So I'll go through and I'll do the assessment with you. I'll connect you with our financial planner. I'll connect you with our attorneys to do estate plans. And there's no service plan charge for you to do that. And if you've made it through this long in our call today, in our webinar today, I'm also going to send you our National Resource Directory. And so I was able to work with one mom and I give her a few of the resources for her state. But this way you can have all of the resources for your state rather than just a few. Because again, your situation's going to change. Today you might not need adaptive recreational or education, but you might tomorrow. So I wanted to leave some time for questions. Do you have any questions for us? If you want to either unmute or put your question in the chat, we would be happy to help you with that. And I'm just going to leave this up here for you so that you can follow us on Instagram, you can follow us on Facebook, and you can also use that link for a consultation. So I'm going to just open it up to you. What are your questions? What are your pain points that you're trying to solve now? Do you have financial planning questions, estate plan questions? And Brady and I will be able to help you.
Jenny, that was fantastic. I definitely want to reiterate this is a very unique offer that we're offering for those that are part of the webinar today. Normally, an engagement with one of our specialists like Jenny would be a $9.95 a year engagement. And for our attendees today, we are waiving that consultation fee. And so it is a complimentary consultation, which we'd be able to get you in touch with those services that you need. And so that's a unique thing that we're excited to be able to offer you today.
Any last minute questions before I give you back a little bit of your lunch hour? Okay, and we will send this recording to you. So you'll have it emailed to you. I know that we talked about a lot of information, so you can share it with the people in your life who are helping you to make these decisions. I know that you might have a spouse or, you know, an older child that's going to possibly be a caregiver, and you can start to think about this. Caringtide.com, we're here for you. We're going to walk this walk with you. When Jackson was diagnosed, I was given one sheet of information by our geneticist, and he just said, good luck. But I was so happy to have that resource. I had that one piece of paper with a potential resource. And so throughout Jackson's life, I've had to find my village and I've had to find my people because we didn't fit into a specific disability type group. And so Caring Tide wants to be your village. We want to be your people. We'll help you through these hard things. We walk the walk, we talk the talk. Brady has children with disabilities. I do as well. And these are questions we've had to think through as well. So we can be very thoughtful. A lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And so let us help you figure these pieces out.
Thank you all for your attendance today.
And William, I see your note. If you want to, use that consultation link, I would love to speak with you. It's caringtide.com/consultation. And you can look at my calendar and grab a spot with me. And I would love to work with you.
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you all. I just went ahead and put those 4 in the weight room. I'm actually curious to see how long they'd stay on.
I know. Okay. I was trying to remove everybody, but it was taking me a little bit longer. I wish there was a way to globally do that.
Yeah, well, I think we can get into that webinar format. And so I have a Zoom. I have to jump on it in 7 minutes, but let's debrief on this.